ala Nabi al-Karim. Respected guests, I welcome you all for this second Istac World Professorial Lecture on the topic Al-Ghazali's Epistemology. But before we begin our session today, I request all of us to keep, no, we cannot stand up, to keep silence for the national anthem, Negaraku. Please play the national anthem.
Share the wisdom to the spirit of Islam. Revelation and reason shall excel, shall prevail. Merging faith and knowledge, we, the Khalifa, we will fulfill the Amana. Together we make the world a better place. Forever expand the culture of Iqra. IUM is to realize the meaning of Ramadan.
Thank you very much for playing the national anthem and the IIUM song. Once again, I welcome everyone to this second Istac World Professorial Lecture. The topic is Al-Ghazali's Epistemology, its significance for contemporary human thought. Respected Professor Ahmad Faris bin Ismail, the Deputy Rector for Academic and Internationalization at IIUM, Professor Abdul Aziz, Dean, Istac IIUM, welcome to this conference, to this session, to this webinar, sorry. And first of all, I welcome and request Professor Abdul Aziz Barghouth, the Dean of Istac IIUM, to say introductory remarks.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear Professor Faris, Deputy Rector Academic and Internationalization, our UMC members, deans, directors, Professor Osman, Bakar, our guest speaker today, all participants from within the university and outside and elsewhere in the world. All brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We are very happy and glad to be able today to go for our second Istac World Professorial Lecture. As you remember, the first one was delivered by our beloved Rector, Professor Zul, on the topic of humanizing education towards a model, an integrated model of university of the future. For your information, dear brothers and sisters, this project of the Istac World Professorial Lecture comes in the context of reviving the intellectual discourse, the intellectual dynamism of the Institute, trying to bring scholars from Malaysia, from our university, and from overseas, and engaging Muslim scholars and non-Muslim scholars in an endeavor to build a kind of exchange of ideas and views that will be hopefully used to solve some of our problems or what our communities and societies are facing. We are very happy today to have with us Professor Osman Bakar, our second invited speaker, professor. And in fact, this is a very great added value to us. The presence of Prof. Osman with his vast experience in the area of Islamic thought and civilization, as well as in the areas of renewal and tajdeed. I think, inshallah, we will be learning a lot of ideas and views. In the end, I would like to thank Prof. Faris for his presence with us here. I'm sure he has many other things to attend, but because of the importance of this program, the professorial lecture, he is with us here and he will be with us. Inshallah, will benefit from his views and suggestions. With this, once again, I welcome all our brothers and sisters, professors, doctors from within the university and outside, our Muslim and non-Muslim participant. Welcome once again to our second Iwpl. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair, Professor. Very good. Now I call upon Professor Ahmed Faris bin Ismail, the Deputy Rector for Academic and Internationalization at the International Islamic University, to say his welcoming remarks. Professor Faris, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good afternoon. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Thank you very much, Professor Imtiaz, who is the moderator for this afternoon session. Of course, respected speaker for this second Istac World Professorial Lecture, Professor Datuk Osman Bakar, the holder of Al-Ghazali Chair at Istac. My respected colleagues, Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Barghut, the Dean of Istac, my other colleagues in UMC, the deans, professors, lecturers, students. I think students are very important, I think, for this event, as well as our invited guests and participants from not only IIUM, but also outside IIUM. I can see that I think there are some people coming from even Indonesia and maybe some from Middle East. I can see from the Zoom here. So I guess first and foremost, I would like to congratulate Istac, Professor Abdul Aziz and the team for having this Istac World Professorial Lecture Series. Okay, as mentioned by Professor Aziz, the Dean just now, this is our second series. Inshallah, I think we will have many more series by well-renowned scholar in the relevant areas that I think will share in this important intellectual discourse. So I guess on behalf of the university, IIUM, we really would like to support this type of event. And just to mention that this is also in conjunction with the Academia Month that we are celebrating this month. Okay, so Alhamdulillah, there are so many academic activities that we are having, including this Istac World Professorial Lecture. I guess I would like to support the point mentioned by Prof. Aziz just now. This is a very important avenue for exchanges of ideas, okay, where we can have experts coming from different parts of the world, okay, experts from Istac especially, okay, and through this type of intellectual discourse, then we are able to have a good conversation, good understanding, good sharing of ideas, with the hope that we may come out with new ideas to solve the many problems facing the humanity. Indeed, I believe that with this pandemic, there are a lot of things that we need to reset, that we need to really think again. And I like the topic today by Prof. Osman Bakar, going to relook and revisit on the Al-Ghazali's epistemology and see how, it's always relevant. Meaning to say that how can, even though we claim that the world is so advanced, so modern, but I think the nature of human being is still the same. I think from the creation, the first creation of Adam, I think until the end of the world, I think the human nature is still the same. So I think this is a very important role that Istac and IIUM can play. How can we provide the solution that is aligned with the nature, with the fitrah of human beings, of course, in becoming or in exercising our role as the Khalifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. So I guess this is a very important event. When we can revisit, relook, and at the same time go back to the fundamentals, and hopefully that we can provide a better alternative for the solution in many areas actually that I think the worlds are waiting to look for the solutions facing the humanity. I guess this is also a very important platform for networking. Normally out of this type of event, then a lot more collaborations, interdisciplinary work, research can be done, and I can see that the participants also come from different fields in their field of study. I would like to mention that this event is very much in line with our Sejahtera academic framework that we have at IIUM. I think I have to emphasize this. We have launched the Sejahtera academic framework by the Minister of Higher Education in Ramadan. Okay, this framework actually provide a platform and a place where we can practice, because it's a holistic framework. We can practice humanizing education, transformative education, with experiential learning, with the hope that we will produce a better graduates, not only a better graduates, but we as the professors and lecturers also at IIUM should write on this framework to become a better person, and also to come up with a better way of delivering our knowledge as well as conducting our research together with our other stakeholders, including, of course, the postgraduate students, our students, where we want to have the environment where we engage all our stakeholders, especially the students, that we as the professors also would like to learn from the students. And then this can be done through this professorial lecture, seminar, intellectual discourse. This is the atmosphere, the ecosystem that we would like to build, where we need to really think how to work together and how to support each other and complement each other in coming out with not only new discovery, but in terms of how to put the philosophy and the concepts and the framework into practice. And of course, we hope that this also will help the Ummah. And of course, we hope that also our students, will become the good future leaders. So I take this opportunity to congratulate and to thank Professor Osman Bakar for his, contribution for this afternoon event. Of course, I always enjoy listening to him. Always there are many. He always, started with the philosophy, with the history, but then he will bring us back to where we are now. And hopefully today, inshallah, Prof. Osman, I think we look forward to hear from you and your wisdom, your advice, and maybe your guidance as inshallah we move forward. So Prof. Aziz, I think congratulations again, and we look forward for many other lectures in the future, inshallah. So wabillahi taufiq hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah khair, Professor Faris. Thank you very much. And you really highlighted that linking of this professorial lecture today with Insan Sajatra or human well-being, human welfare, and its importance for the academia, for the students, for the public. Thank you very much for this introduction. Before I let Professor Osman to give his talk, I just want to give a little bit of an introduction to what is epistemology. Everybody hears the word epistemology. In Arabic, it means Nazariyat al-Marifa, or epistemology, which has been generally translated as theory of knowledge, using reason. But unfortunately, in today's world, when we talk about epistemology, and you open a book of philosophy, or it always talks about Western philosophy, and Western philosophers talking about epistemology, then referring to the Muslims. And today we have an opportunity to listen to Professor Datuk Osman Bakar on this topic. If you open a book on philosophy and epistemology, they talk about John Locke, Immanuel Kant, and the atheist Bertrand Russell, and now also feminist epistemology. But this, with giving that in background, we need to know what is Islam's approach to that, and that is what Professor Osman is going to do this afternoon with us. So let me introduce Professor Osman Dato. Professor Osman formally before his presentation. Professor Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar is the holder of Al-Ghazali Chair at Istac IIUM. He has a doctorate in Islamic philosophy from Temple University, Philadelphia, USA. We were students together. We know each other for around 40 years. And he's currently, as I said, the holder of Al-Ghazali Chair. He is Emeritus Professor in Philosophy of Science at University of Malaya. He was also formerly Distinguished Professor of Philosophy of Science at University of Malaya, I already mentioned. He was formerly Distinguished Professor and Director of Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Center for Islamic Studies at University Brunei in Darussalam. And then he was also the former Malaysia Chair of Islam in Southeast Asia at Prince Al-Walid Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding at Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. He was also former Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academic and Research at the University of Malaya. Dr. Osman is author and editor of 40 books, I can't beat that record, and more than 300 articles on various aspects of Islamic thought and civilization, another remarkable achievement. And he's a leading authority, really a world-known, renowned authority on Islamic philosophy, Islamic thought, Islamic civilization, and he is referred by many authors, by many writers around the world. His most well-known book, which I find referenced again and again in all the books I read, is Classification of Knowledge in Islam. I think that is his magnum opus. And his other books are Tawheed and Science, and his latest book is Al-Farabi, Life, Works, and Significance. After that, a most recent one in 2020 is Colonialism in the Malay Archipelago. He has been named among the 500 most influential Muslims in the world since 2009. He was made Datuk in 1994 by the Sultan of Pahang and Datuk by the King in 2000. Without much further ado, I welcome Professor Osman to present his lecture. Professor Osman, you have 1 hour.
Thank you, Professor Imtiaz. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Respected Professor Imtiaz as the moderator, respected Professor Ahmad Faris, Deputy Rector in charge of the Academic and Internationalization, the Dean, Professor Abdul Aziz, very good, members of the University Management Committee, the Deans, Professors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to acknowledge my thanks to the Dean of Istac, Professor Abdul Aziz Bergut, for inviting me to be the second speaker in this very prestigious series of the professorial lecture series, which is the second. And I would like to make a connection to the first lecture that was presented last month by the Honorable Rector, distinguished Emeritus Professor Tan Sri Professor Zul. The topic was mentioned earlier by the Dean. That is related to humanization of education, but also the subtitle touching on the very important subject of the model university. So I would like to say to you that I'm very happy that the topic that I'll be speaking today, in a sense, is a logical sequence. It's a consequence to what the rector has presented. Because I'm going to speak about the subject of epistemology, to speak about Al-Ghazali's epistemology. Actually, I would like to make a little change to the title, because what I wanted to have initially was Al-Ghazali's integral epistemology, not just epistemology. So I would argue that, I would say that actually there is a close connection between the first lecture and my lecture, because I can say, well, how can we realize the idea of the model university, especially for the very, very challenging years, decades ahead, how to provide that? And my response to that, my answer to that will be, we need an integral epistemology. So in other words, integral epistemology is necessary in order to realize the concept of the ideal university, the model university. And it is this topic that I would like to speak on. I've prepared a few slides. Yes, my topic is Al-Ghazali's epistemology there, but I want to put it integral epistemology, and its significance for contemporary human thought. So the Ghazali integral epistemology, its significance for contemporary human thought. Don't worry about the artist's impression of Al-Ghazali. Just that because as you all know, if you refer to the online thing, there are so many different artist impressions of Al-Ghazali and other Muslim thinkers, and no two impressions are alike. I just but I wanted to say about this, why I put up these images. Those who study Al-Ghazali, especially Orientalists in the West, they have been complaining. They say to studying Al-Ghazali, they are not sure who is the real Al-Ghazali. Which Al-Ghazali is the real Al-Ghazali? Why they say that? Because Al-Ghazali, in his writings, you find that he has been writing different topics from different perspectives. Is as a jurist, as a faqih, as a jurist, as a theologian, meaning as a mutakallim, as a scholar of Kalam, as an kind of critical of philosophy, as a Sufi. So precisely because these different perspectives are to be found in Al-Ghazali's epistemology, so there arises a question for some of them who they have been used to having one perspective of looking at Muslim figures, Muslim scholars in the past. Some of them find a problem how to really understand the Al-Ghazali's thinking. But to me, I mean, yes, if you want to look now, we have the artist's impression of Al-Ghazali, more a kind of more recent impression. I don't think we can know who is the real Al-Ghazali based on this physical attempt to portray who the real face of Al-Ghazali. But it is easier to know the real Al-Ghazali by studying the writings, his writing. Now, I would like to start my presentation proper this afternoon by quoting from Ibn Khaldun in the Muqaddimah, because this quotation has some connection with the things that I'm going to speak about. Let me read a quote. It should be known that instruction of children in the Quran is a symbol of Islam. Muslims have and practice such instruction in all their cities because it imbues hearts with a firm belief in Islam and its articles of faith, which are derived from the verses of the Quran and certain prophetic tradition. The Quran has become the basis of instruction, the foundation for all habits that may be acquired later on. The reason for this is that the things one is taught in one's youth take root more deeply than anything else. They are the basis of all later knowledge. The first impression the heart receives is, in a way, the foundation of all scholarly habits. This is a quotation from the Muqaddimah, and my purpose of making this quotation is precisely to see the connection. In other words, what Ibn Khaldun is saying is supposed to be true to all Muslim cities in the past, But I would like in particular to test whether, or to examine whether what Ibn Khaldun is saying here has any relevance, any application to what Al-Ghazali went through in terms of his education. And Al-Ghazali came several centuries before Ibn Khaldun. Let's see what, with that quotation as the kind of background. Now, I would like to talk about the formative period of Al-Ghazali's epistemological thought. Because in order to understand who Al-Ghazali is, it is very, very important to understand his epistemological thought. Professor Imtiaz correctly said, I mean, many of Muslims today know better about this, about modern Western epistemology, but not the Islamic one. Well, in reality, of course, I mean, the Al-Ghazali even exercised influence on the later thinkers in the West, both during the Middle Ages and even during the Renaissance and the modern period until Bakar. So Al-Ghazali's influence, I mean, was extensive, not only in the Muslim world, not only in the Ummah, but in the Western world, both classical and modern. So I would like to, let me say this. Now, many of you, I mean, are quite familiar with many things about Al-Ghazali, certainly some of you. He is well known as a scholar in different fields. So what I'm saying, what I'm going to say today, in terms of his certain episodes in Al-Ghazali's life, maybe not new, but what I'm interested in my presentation is to discuss the important events in his life, to interpret them from the perspective of epistemology, including from the beginning, which is basically the formative period. I discussed the first 25 years. The first 25 years of Al-Ghazali's age. Early childhood education, boarding school, madrasa, in Tus, where he was born, in the province of Khorasan in present-day Iran. His secondary education in Jurjan, Azadan. His university education and teaching in Nishapur when he was about from 18 to 25 years of age. And then right up to the point when he had a personal crisis, which I refer in my writing as his epistemological or intellectual crisis. Okay, let me go through each of these phases in his the formative period. Go to the, now I have here, you can see that a map which basically shows the world in which Al-Ghazali grew up, where he studied, where he became a professor, but not the other part of his life. For example, when in the post-intellectual crisis period, where he became a Sufi kind of spiritual retreat from away from society, where he went to in different places, including Damascus, Jerusalem, and so on. But this map just to show the important towns, important cities where he underwent his early education. All right. Now, maybe I come back if there's a need for me to that map. But let me talk about his childhood education. Well, to begin with, his home education. And the teacher, of course, his own father. Now, I want to say about his father, because always bearing in mind Ibn Khaldun's theory of the impact of the early education on later on later thought. So Al-Ghazali's teacher, also by the name of Muhammad Al-Ghazali, his father was a religious man, but more kind of inclined to Sufi the practices. His family had many well-known Sufis, but of course there were also jurists from his family. Now, it is important to understand the kind of later on development in Al-Ghazali's thinking, because when right from the beginning of his childhood, he was exposed by his father to the world of Sufism. In other words, the educational ideas that to which Al-Ghazali was exposed was a religious orientation, but more the kind of in the association with the close friends of his father, who in a sense were practicing Sufis. Now, not long before his father died, maybe his father had a premonition that he was going to die, and so he entrusted Muhammad Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali's real name was also Muhammad. His name just Muhammad. Muhammad Al-Ghazali, when he was a young boy, he was entrusted to a close friend of his father. So basically, it was a kind of personal tuition, special teacher. And he provided kind of wakaf money for that. Now, Muhammad Al-Ghazali, together with his younger brother, Ahmad, Muhammad and Ahmad, they were entrusted these two teachers. Well, what were the kind of education ideas, the early education ideas to which the Al-Ghazali was exposed? Well, it is what Ibn Khaldun said. I mean, it is something that is throughout the world kind of a familiar thing, the Quran, Hadith. But in the case of Al-Ghazali, is listening to stories about saints and memorizing mystical love poems. This is what we have in the traditional biographies about him. Now, this is what I like to draw the kind of epistemological the conclusion, or rather the inferences from the kind of environment to which Al-Ghazali and his brother Ahmad were exposed to. We need to ask, I mean, we need to reflect on this, the Quran, the role of the Quran, the role of the Hadith, the role of listening to stories about saints and memorizing mystical love poems. What I intend to do here is to point out to some epistemological significance that later on, not necessarily at that time, but later on had an impact on the thinking of Al-Ghazali. Now, I mentioned here four inferences that I can make from that first phase of education. What are these four things? First, transmission of traditional knowledge to sustain society through the Quran, the Hadith, and through the literature, Sufi literature. All right. Basically, it is a means of transmitting traditional knowledge. And I would like, since we have been talking about sustainability, more about the environment, but if you talk about sustainability of society, it is very, very important. I think we should reflect on this. How can we sustain our society if there is no transmission of traditional values, traditional knowledge? We will not be able to sustain society. So therefore, it's very important. Al-Ghazali was exposed to this important culture, transmission of traditional knowledge. As I said, at that time, in Muslim societies everywhere, there was a familiar thing. It's nothing new. The idea of transmission of traditional knowledge, and the Quran symbolizes the most important symbol of transmission of traditional knowledge. The Hadith, the second most important of transmission of traditional knowledge. Another mode of transmission for some, and certainly for Al-Ghazali, listening to stories about saints, because here it's about learning the values, learning in a sense, you know, it is about the what sort of role model that can be provided by these people known to be saints. All right. Then so that's one, and the other one is memorization as integral element of learning. Of course, nowadays we already downplay this. It's not important, precisely because we argue that we have the technology to record things. All right, so memorization is not it's not important thing. But in the past, memorization, in those days, in the pre-recording days, you know, we depend on our natural memory. So memorization is a very integral element of learning, and this is going to be repeated again and again by the scholars, right? And certainly Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali, in some of his writings, emphasized on the importance of memorization as an element of learning. Now, the other one is epistemology of respecting authorities in knowledge. Epistemology of respecting authorities in knowledge. That is a very important element of Islamic knowledge culture. To respect, how to respect authorities, and when do we start respecting authorities? And for Al-Ghazali, this respecting authorities begin from early. Now, the other one is epistemology of mystical literature and the points. All right. In other words, through exposure to mystical literature, therefore, is also the children is already exposed a kind of the first glimpse of the interaction between religion and literature, right? Between literature brings about the question of language, the question of beauty, the question of lessons to be learned. Now, yes, so this is are the things, are some of the things that which came into the mind of the young Al-Ghazali. All right, the next is boarding school at Madrasa in Tus. Now, when according to the biographies, of course, when the trust fund for the study for Al-Ghazali and his brother came to know, was out of no more money for that, so his father sent both of them to study in the boarding school in Tus. Now, the teacher that we know, the teacher by the name of Hamad Al-Raskani, and he's in the field of jurisprudence. So the educational idea, when Al-Ghazali was about from the primary, we consider as primary school until 12 years or 13 years of age, he learned jurisprudence. He wanted to be a jurist. Now, you see, we have to understand it. I'm trying to have you to understand what is the contrast. What is the contrast between the earlier exposure of Al-Ghazali to a kind of Sufi ambience, right? Talking about the world, the spiritual world, talking more about the heart, all right? Now Al-Ghazali is exposed to another kind of strand, this kind of current, this knowledge current, which is the jurist. You know, for many students of epistemology in the West today, the perspective of jurisprudence is something that is entirely the opposite of the opposite of the perspective of a Sufi, right? So the imagery that we have among many people today, even including among Muslims, jurisprudence represents a very, very rational science, right? There's some kind of irrationality. To some, Sufism represents another kind of irrationality. So you have Al-Ghazali exposed to two different things, two contrasting things. One exposed the kind of mind that require Al-Ghazali to think in terms of something not rational really, yeah, and more kind of what appeals to the heart. Whereas for the jurisprudence, that appeals to the to the rational, the use of reason, the use of logic. Now, but it is there, I think, during his study under Ahmad al-Kani, that perhaps the seed of an ambition of Al-Ghazali to be a jurist. So instead of wanted to be a Sufi, he wanted to be a jurist. He wanted, in today's term, which means that he wanted to be a lawyer. And we read, of course, that Al-Ghazali really has wanted to be some great jurist. Certainly there were examples, and I just to cut short here. Basically, the seed of an epistemological divergence. Here now, the seed of epistemological divergence exists in Al-Ghazali, which is going to be, to be reflected later on in what I call his intellectual crisis. So it's an interesting thing. Now, then, from TUS, he went to study kind of secondary, what is today would be secondary education in Jurjan, Mazadan, roughly, from the age of 13 to 17 years of age. Basically, what we call the pre-university education. Now here, Al-Ghazali studied with Abu Nasr al-Ismaili in the field of jurisprudence. So this goes, in other words, the mind of Al-Ghazali is really in jurisprudence. Now a more advanced level that we have here. I just have one more point here. I put here, I just want to tell you, because Al-Ghazali said that he, according to some stories, he had the lesson. He had a lesson to be taught by a robber. He said God sent robbers to Al-Ghazali and his few friends. When in Jurjan, if you look at a map, it's quite the distance from Jurjan to Tus is quite So according to the story, that one day Al-Ghazali was returning to Tus with his schoolmates, and along the way they were robbed. They were robbed by the robbers, and the lesson from the story was this. So Al-Ghazali was confronted by the robber, and the robber asked Al-Ghazali to hand over everything in his possession. But he did, out of fear he did, but there's one thing that he kept tied to himself. He does not know. And when this robber saw the knife, he said, what are you having that? Give me everything that you have. Al-Ghazali said, no, this, I won't give this one. This is my knowledge. This is my knowledge. This is my knowledge. And of course, the robber insisted, snatched the thing from him and said, this is your knowledge? Yes. And what the robber snatched from Al-Ghazali was actually lecture notes. His lecture notes, from his teacher, and lecture notes on jurisprudence. And the robber said to Al-Ghazali, what? You call this your knowledge? You call this your knowledge? No, it's not your knowledge. Yeah? How can it be knowledge? I take it away from you, and then you are crying, you're not appealing. But if it is your knowledge, no, why should be complaining? So short, to cut it short, Al-Ghazali said he learned a lesson from that Allah sent him this message by sending a robber, that what is your knowledge, why is actually yours, is not why is stored in books, not stored, well, if you use the modern term, not stored in the in your laptop. So what is stored in your laptop is not your real knowledge. What is in the library is not your knowledge. Real knowledge is what is in your mind, is in your heart. So quite interesting episode in the Al-Ghazali's young days. Then from there he returned to Tus at the age of 17. So from the age of 18 to 25 years of age, that was very, very important period in Al-Ghazali's life. So basically, he went to university education in Nishapur. If you know our history, the Nishapur used to have earlier universities than Baghdad because of political situation. That was, because of the very, very volatile political situation. It was Nishapur which had the university colleges, basically the Nizamiya University College. So he went to Nishapur, the Nizamiya. There he studied under Al-Juwayni. Al-Juwayni at the time was called the Sheikhul Islam of the Seljuk, also the Imam Al-Haramain, noted scholar in both fiqh, usul fiqh and Kalam. He was the person who, in a sense, initiated the move, a very important epistemological move, to philosophize Kalam. In other words, Kalam went to a certain extent a kind of philosophization, the acceptance of certain parts of philosophy into Kalam. Now, so basically, Al-Ghazali, when he arrived in university in Nishapur, he was exposed first to advanced jurisprudence, to Kalam, to logic, to natural philosophy. And Al-Ghazali learned from Al-Juwayni all these things. There you see different currents of epistemology now. In the case of jurisprudence, of course, it's the same kind of question of epistemology, but at more advanced level. And certainly, Al-Ghazali learned also the usul fiqh, the principles of the jurisprudence, which involves a kind of a higher treatment of epistemology. And then Kalam, of course, is a different science altogether. Kalam has its own method, its own kind of thinking, and certainly, as we know, the epistemology of Kalam combines iman, faith, and very, very rational arguments, rational and scientific arguments. And the logic and natural philosophy of Al-Juwayni certainly contributed that. So in other words, this is a very important phase, a very important phase of Al-Ghazali. He was exposed to this. And it's important for him when he wanted to write the Tahfud al-Falasifa, the book or the very critical of philosophy. All right. Now, the Al-Ghazali certainly impressed Al-Juwayni. Al-Juwayni was impressed with his work, so he appointed him as a teaching assistant after he finished his undergraduate. He went to become a teaching assistant. So until 1085, when the Juwayni passed away, he was teaching assistant at Nizamiya. Now, there during those years, until 25, he wrote his first work on legal theory and methodology, the Al-Mankhul min Ilmi al-Usul, which may be translated as a resume of science of principles at a very, very young age, dealing, and we know, I mean, that involves already philosophy. Because if we understand what usul fiqh is, the principle of the principles of jurisprudence is, it is a kind of philosophy, because philosophy is not only found in falsafah of the philosophers. There is philosophy in usul fiqh. There's no doubt about that. Right? Now, so what sort of epistemological perspectives were developed during these very important years in university? First, the epistemology of Kalam. So Al-Ghazali was exposed to epistemology of Kalam, and later he became a scholar of Kalam, one of the greatest mutakallimun. And then the epistemology of principles of jurisprudence. We emphasize rational thinking, and certainly the importance of empirical proof, right? In other words, how can you do jurisprudence without learning logic, being very rational, and so on. So the development of the logical mind and rational thinking was developed, was developed in the mind of Al-Ghazali. Not only that, there's also the development of the philosophical mind. So these were important years, intellectually speaking, for Al-Ghazali. He's already learning the kind of the foundation of many important subjects. What's important here, the epistemological thought of Al-Ghazali was expanding. All right, and then I'll go to the Al-Ghazali's epistemological or intellectual crisis. Now, when did he experience this crisis? Well, our reliable source of information about all these years that I'm talking about was his autobiography, his intellectual autobiography, Munkith min ad-Dalal, the deliverance from error. So I'm trying to construct, in fact, what I did in my writing, I constructed to construct, because not all the details are, in terms of the precise dates were given, but based on different sources, and including this very important autobiography, I think we can roughly say that he experienced what he called this intellectual crisis between 1081 and 1083, just into 2 years, when he was 23 to 25 years old, right? And he was in the prime of his youth. Now, the place where it was at the Zamia College in Shapu, when he was basically the teaching assistant to Al-Juwayni. Now, what's the nature of the crisis? It is, I would consider, as epistemological. I will explain shortly what I mean. Now, what are the contributing factors of Al-Ghazali's crisis? In short, it is his exposure to different ways of knowing. And then how long did he suffer? We had this intellectual malady. According to him, according to his own testimony, 2 months, about 2 months. And then what's the outcome of the crisis? Well, I mean, this is, I mean, he is going to be a professor. Yeah? But let me go to a bit more detail to the first to the nature of the crisis. I try to summarize here the nature of the crisis that Al-Ghazali experienced. According to my understanding, it was the crisis of finding the rightful place for each of the human faculties of knowing within the total scheme of knowledge. So Al-Ghazali, as a bright young person, right? Thinking a lot about knowledge, and as he tells us, that he was looking for certainty in knowledge. So basically, you see, he reflects upon his own condition, upon the human condition as such. So what do we have as our faculties of knowing? This is very important for education, for especially for faculty education. For this psychological thing about the education, each of the human faculties. What it means that we, first of all, we have the five external senses. We have the 5 external senses, which are means of knowing things. We know, we are able to know things. We hear, we see, we taste, we touch, we smell. All these are sources of data for our knowledge, for reason. Now then we have reason. So reason is able to think, to provide knowledge, to give knowledge. All right. And then of course we have faith. We believe in the Quran. Based upon faith, we believe in the prophetic hadith. But there is another faculty of knowing, which for a person at a young age, I mean, in the case of Al-Ghazali, that proved to be the thing. All right. So in others, what they call the faculty of the inner senses, not the external senses. Not talking about the inner senses. We also have inner senses, the kind of the spiritual heart, spiritual eye, spiritual ear, that are able to know things that are not open to our normal reason. So I think this is he taught a lot about this, and that proved to be a problem, and that's why I say it was a crisis. There was a kind of crisis that he faced of finding the rightful place for each of the human faculties of knowing. And secondly, the crisis of establishing the right relationship between reason and intellectual intuition. So he said that intellectual intuition is something that we off and on we experience, but it points to something else, it's something more fundamental. There is another faculty inside us that is able to know spiritual reality, not just a matter of belief. He's not interested as a matter of belief. He wants to experience it at a level to really experience it in the same that we can experience physical things very directly. There's no need for logic. There's no need for for kind of rational or a kind of logic. Yes, kind of logic to know those this spiritual thing. So this is what I call supra-rational experiences. Now, he was also adopting the reliability of both sense data, whether the sense data refer to colors, to sounds, and whatnot. So this is what he called the seer, the sense data and the rational data of the category of the self-evident truths called the daruriyah. So in the book, if we read the Munkith Min al-Dolal, he tried a kind of inner debate was going inside him. He tried to have a kind of, for example, he wasn't, or rather, he has adopted. He doesn't feel. I mean, the sense data are not reliable anymore. So he adopted that. Yeah, something which accepted all the while, now came to him, we cannot really depend, we cannot accept the reliability. I mean, knowledge from senses, knowledge that is obtained through senses, not reliable. So he gave the example. He gave the example here. I can have time to give the example here. Now, he said, in his mind, there was a debate between the senses and reason. Senses tell us we see something. Let's say we see the moon. We see the moon, and we know based on our sense of sight what the size of the full moon is. But reason tells the sense, no. I mean, yes, you have the image of the moon, but you are not able to tell the real size of the moon. So what tells the size of the moon is not you senses, it's not you the sense of sight, but it's reason that makes its conclusion about the size of the moon. So in that sense, the science, the data obtained by the senses, I mean, I'm not telling the truth. The senses are not telling the real truth. Right? Senses are not telling the real truth. Reason comes out superior to the senses. And then, of course, there's another source of argument coming from a kind of something in the mind of Al-Ghazali saying, all right, yes, but can we trust? Can we trust really the experience of the rational data? Right? He gave the example. Al-Ghazali gave the example here. He said, take the dream. The Prophet said that actually the Prophet said that this is not the world is like the world we are living now is like we are sleeping. But when we die, we are awake. So Al-Ghazali said, yes, he's now applying the rule of analogy. Al-Ghazali, the jurist, now is applying the principle of analogy. The analogy is, if later death, if death proves us, all right, that this world is not real, then how can it be real? How can we be certain about the knowledge that is obtained through through reason? So this kind of things Al-Ghazali was telling us because he wanted to tell about the crisis they was facing, but that crisis was epistemological. So he said 2 months he suffered from that. So all right, let's go to what were the contributing factors. Al-Ghazali was looking for certain knowledge that is certain, al-ain al-yaqini. So he was looking for that. He was that kind of person. Some person may not experience that, but I think there are people who experience that. Now, so he said he was always looking for this kind of knowledge, the knowledge that will be that his yaqeen is certain of. And then Al-Ghazali's the constituting factor also is Al-Ghazali's exposure to different methodological claims to knowledge. So when he was the teaching assistant at Nizamiya, he already exposed a different methodological claim about the how to know and what knowledge is certain. So basically, to summarize, these are the major contributing factors. And what was the outcome of the crisis? There's nothing logical. There's nothing that we can something hold that this very that everybody asking me, but it's just a kind of very subjective thing because Al-Ghazali said God cast nur into his breast, his basira. Yeah. So according to him, God saves his crisis. Yeah, helps him to overcome the crisis through kind of experience, a kind of intuition, a kind of nur. Yeah, that gives him the way out of his crisis. As a result of that, there was a restoration of the epistemical balance in Al-Ghazali's mind, at least at the theoretical level. At least at the theoretical level, Al-Ghazali felt comfortable. All right, all the things that trouble him now, okay. So and that's called the restoration of the balance. All right. But all right, for a moment, that is very, very important. The first 25 years of Al-Ghazali, and I just want to relate that to make you see what I mean by this epistemological issue of the crisis. Now, the next is Al-Ghazali spiritual crisis. I can't go into the details of what transpired in between, but I just want to point out the epistemological issues that were developed later. Now, in 1095, all right, about a decade of the intellectual crisis. Now we go 10 years later, when he was about 37 years old. Same place. I'm sorry. Now he went to Baghdad. Yeah. Now, those who don't know this history, Al-Ghazali, I think when he was about 28 years old, he was appointed by the Caliph, or more particularly by Nizam al-Mulk, the Prime Minister, to become the professor in the new Nizamiya University in Baghdad. Right? It's about 28, and Al-Ghazali he became professor in law, and I think when he was about 33 years old, about 4 or 5 years after being appointed, he was appointed to the chair of the Shafi'i law. And at the age of 33, he delivered his inaugural lecture, Syarahan Perdana, inaugural lecture. According to to what's reported, the hall was packed with people listening to Al-Ghazali, and he was at a very young age, 33. But here, at the Al-Ghazali, so about 4 years later, after the Syarahan Perdana, after the inaugural lecture, he had this intellectual crisis. So he had this crisis when he was a professor at the Baghdad Nizamiya. Now, what's the nature of the crisis? The crisis is different from the first one. The first one was epistemological, but this second one is spiritual. But then, since you are interested in epistemological, what is the connection between the intellectual crisis and the spiritual crisis? I think what the okay, I'll come to that. But first, I mean, what are the contributing factors of this second crisis? This second crisis is the again now we see now Ibn Khaldun's what is the background in what Ibn Khaldun said about what was experienced in the young age will later will appear later on. All right, it has an impact on the later situation. So the consequence is the growing conviction that attaining certitude and beatitude in the afterlife lay in the following the way of the Sufis. And the second factor is his brother Ahmad. So Al-Ghazali's younger brother Ahmad has an influence. Why this? Why the second crisis? Why they wanted to follow the way of the Sufi? Because his brother Ahmad was already a distinguished Sufi before Al-Ghazali. Now, according to some sources, it was Ahmad, in a sense, who was responsible for getting Al-Ghazali to follow the way of the Sufis, and even to initiate him into spiritual path. Right? Now, as for the outcome of the crisis, that's what happens: spiritual conversion, to the point that he decided he made a very, very important decision. That is, he left teaching. He left teaching, a very, very high position in the university. He was, considered as the foremost academic of the time. So he decided to leave teaching, in fact, to devote full time to an ascetic and contemplative life. And he did that for about 11 years until he returned to the teaching again at the insistence of the rulers at the time. Now, so this is a different kind of crisis, because it is a crisis about abandoning one form of life, one way of life for another. So, but he did. But the important thing here, I just want to interpret this from the viewpoint of epistemology. What was involved here? When I said that after the crisis, after the intellectual crisis, Al-Ghazali, in a sense, restored his balance, a kind of the restoration of the epistemological balance, where different ways of knowing came in place. In other words, that was what Al-Ghazali experiencing in a sense at the theoretical level. In a sense, it was, he accepted, theoretically he accepted the position of different ways of knowing, right? But in practice, it means, all right, while he accepted Sufism is another way of knowing, but certain things happen, certain thing happens in between, and after that, and his brother played a role in that. In other words, he became more certain that Sufism provided another epistemological approach to knowledge, which he called the supra-rational experiences. So there is another way, another source of knowledge altogether. So Al-Ghazali now wanted to experience knowledge from at another level. This is what he called the supra-rational experience, such as, and he uses different words for that. Datuk, for example, Datuk, taste. Datuk is a very powerful symbol of taste. So tested knowledge is regarded by the Sufis as very, very important. Okay, now the now Al-Ghazali, yes, in 1106 he returned to public teaching at Nishapur at the assistance of Fakrul Mulk, the son of Nizamul Mulk. He was a wazir at that time, so he insisted that Al-Ghazali return. Now, what I would like to say here is that, in a sense, the return of Al-Ghazali to public teaching is kind of symbolized the complete circle that he went through, that Al-Ghazali went through. He went through an epistemological journey, right from the early days when he emphasized the use of empirical thing. Certainly, as a young lawyer, to be a jurist, and he practiced that, the importance of empirical data. But then, he also accepted the epistemology of Kalam, then the epistemology of the Sufis. Now he comes up as a new person. Yes, he was able to see all the different ways of knowing in a kind of harmonious way. This is what this is what I mean by integral epistemology. I'll have to say more about that. But no, he completed his year already, all right, just before resuming teaching. This is important. So to me, it's important. It's quite symbolic here. Then Al-Ghazali completed his Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences, or the sciences of religion, before he resumed teaching. Because Ulumuddin is a symbol of integral epistemology, where knowledge from different aspects, or rather all the different sources of knowledge, are mentioned by Al-Ghazali. If we read Ihya Ulumuddin, then we realize that all these different elements of an integral epistemology are there. So he went back teaching, not on the same level as before he left teaching. Now, he returned to teaching. It's a new Al-Ghazali in terms of his ideas, in terms of his vision of knowledge. He was able to see unity of knowledge. He was able to see harmony between different sources of knowledge, not confrontation, not conflict, but rather and Ihya Ulumuddin symbolized that. Now, I think he also wrote his intellectual autobiography in Shapur during this second teaching, during the written teaching. This Mungkith Min Ad-Dhalal that I talk about, that is also an important source of epistemology. Another important source of Ghazali's epistemology is that. Then he returned to Tus around 1110, basically 1 year before his death. He retired to Tus and continued to teach and to write yeah. I want to come back now to summarize the Al-Ghazali's integral epistemology. Basically, the message is quite very interesting, but I would like you to appreciate in the mind of Al-Ghazali, you have different epistemological streams. The streams are the streams up there, but they exist side by side in a harmonious way. So the essence of Al-Ghazali's integral epistemology may be described as follows. Empirical data and proofs, yes, but empiricism, no. What I mean by empiricism is the epistemological belief. The epistemological belief that only empirical data are reliable, the others are not. So as I said, empiricism, no. By all means, collect all the empirical data that we need. Offer all the kind of empirical proof, but do not accept this philosophical belief of empiricism when you give value to those empirical data in such a way that no, the others are not accepted. They are not considered as reliable. Rational data and proofs, yes, but rationalism, no. Rationalism is a physical belief that only knowledge based on reason is acceptable. Supra-rational data and proofs, yes, but spiritualism, no. Divine revelation, yes, but anti-human reason, no. Reason, yes, but anti-divine revelation, no. So what Al-Ghazali is presenting, is insisting on, is epistemological order and justice are the foundation of human civilization. All right, but now, when we see at a contemporary world, what do we have? This is the significance of Al-Ghazali's epistemology for our contemporary human thought. There is epistemological anarchy in the contemporary world of knowledge. It's a strong word from me, but I stick to it. In the world of knowledge today, there is anarchy. And the anarchy arises from, it's a result of not being able to look at this plurality in the ways of knowing, in the sources of knowledge. Right? In fact, what we have here is epistemological tribalism. That is what we have. Yeah, there are many tribes. So in the world of epistemology, there are many tribes. The empiricists, the rationalists, all kind. If you look at the world of scholarship today, so everybody has his own theory about knowledge, and we have different kind of under one leader, under one top scholar, under top one scientist. It's a kind of tribes. So these different groups behave like tribes, but tribes in the field of knowledge. Now, another thing is we see that the tree of knowledge has grown to smallest branches, with specialists clinging to their own branch, feeling happy that they're already knowledgeable when they had hardly seen the whole tree. Please think about that. Yeah, we have not seen the whole tree. People just cling to their branches, right? But in the case of Al-Ghazali, in fact, Al-Ghazali in some of his works did comment on specialization, where he talks about the kind of acceptable specialization and not over specialization. And Al-Ghazali, of course, knew the whole tree. He has seen the whole tree, not just the branches. And even the whole tree, not only the part of the tree above the ground, but also what is underground, meaning the roots of the tree. Now, what is going on in society is a faithful reflection of what is going in the minds of men and women. Today, we are complaining, or rather, when we see the kinds of problems we are facing in our society today, that is really worrying us. But if you think carefully, what's good? Isn't there a connection between what is going on in society with what is going on in our mind, in the way we think? How can we expect to have order, law and order in human society when we do not have law and order in our own mind? I think the Ghazali's point is very important. And so what is Al-Ghazali's answer? What is Al-Ghazali's answer to this kind of situation in the domain of human thought? Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the sciences of religion, which I said earlier, is a symbol of the integral epistemology. So, yes,
Osman,
it's about. So, to me, I think I finished my slides here. I just want to this I reproduce here from the Munkith min al-Dalal, Al-Ghazali's prayer. All right, Ghazali's prayer. Of course, partly he produced the very important prayer. But the point is, why did I bring up this prayer? Because Al-Ghazali, in sense, while many of us recite this dua, this prayer, but not many of us, really hold on to this as a kind of philosophy of knowledge. And in the case of Al-Ghazali, he turned this into a principle, into which he tried to realize in his in all his years of studying, teaching, and writing. Yeah? So then you have the dua beautiful. أسأل أن يصلحني أولا ثم يصلح بي وأن يهديني ثم يهدي بي وأن يريني الحق حقا ويرزقني اتباعه ويريني الباطل باطلا ويرزقني اجتنابه. So here you have the translation here: ask God to reform me first, then to use me as instrument of reform, to guide me, then to use me as instrument of guidance, and to show me the true as true, and to grant me the grace to follow it, and to show me the false as false, and to grant me the grace to shun it. This is Al-Ghazali's philosophy of knowledge seeking, knowledge ordering. So I think, that is the dawn of Al-Ghazali, the reformer. Let me close with this from my book, Classification of Knowledge in Islam. True Islamic revival means the revival of Muslim communal ethics through individual moral transformation. That is the purpose of Al-Ghazali's integral epistemology. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair. Professor Osman Bakar, a very deep lecture, really very intense. You took us, I cannot summarize everything. I'll just highlight some points before I go to the questions posed by different speakers, different people from the audience here. You took us through the epistemological journey and the crisis of Al-Ghazali, and then you talked about his coming to a conclusion that we have to seek knowledge from different ways in a harmonious way of knowing, without without saying that there's only one way of understanding, or that there should be unity of knowledge, not confrontational of knowledge. And towards the end, you talked about the intellectual epistemological anarchy which is existing today. And here Al-Ghazali's approach to knowledge comes very important, that we need ilm al-yaqeen, and this ilm al-yaqeen has to balance between reason and intuition and spirituality. So let me go to the questions. We'll take one by one. Just a minute. The first question is from Brother Muhammad Zaki. He says, can you compare or differentiate between the epistemological approach of Al-Ghazali and Ibn al-Arabi?
Hello, yes. Well, Al-Ghazali paved the way for later school of epistemology, including Ibn Arabi, even including the later school of Irfan in Iran, for example. So, in terms of the elements, there's not much difference between Al-Ghazali and Ibn Arabi. Why Ibn Arabi? Because Ibn Arabi came later. Ibn Arabi was able to benefit from the writings of Al-Ghazali and from others, and Ibn Arabi synthesized that very well. But of course, Ibn Arabi's own own genius, yeah, his own spiritual life, his excellent spiritual life. But so in other words, the epistemology, Ibn Arabi was able to expand, to synthesize the elements of epistemology that were discussed by Al-Ghazali. That is, yeah. That's my response.
Okay. There are several questions from Brother Professor Abdulaziz Bargut. And the question is, where do you place the question of spirituality in epistemological approach and its relevance today?
Yes, the issue is about when talk about spiritual. In Islamic tradition, and which in English, of course, the aqliya, something is intellectual, and ruhiyya, which is the spiritual. But when we talk about epistemology, of course, we mean the approaches, or rather the precisely the sources of knowledge or the faculties of knowing that are different from the other rational faculty. So normally we use the word supra-rational to emphasize that there are ways of knowing that are something additional, something extra, something at higher level of experience than the rational, than the purely rational and the empirical. What Al-Ghazali has been trying to push, or to emphasize, if you say that, we should open ourselves up to the possibility of experiencing knowledge, not just through reason, by rationalizing, by analyzing, by using the word this logic, or we collect empirical data and then we try to interpret those data in a rational way. These are all important sources of knowledge, and Al-Ghazali has managed to put them in their proper place. What are the limits of each? Yeah? What is the function of the physical sensor? What sort of knowledge can be available to man based on the use of physical sensor? What about reason? All right. What about whether the reason is doing analysis or synthesis or using other ways of thinking? What about the supra-rational experiences of Kashaf? He is arguing, in other words, he himself experienced. He spent 11 years in spiritual retreat in order to test those claims by the Sufis earlier. Yeah, some people may accept those claims by the Sufis at the theoretical level. That's why Al-Ghazali said, I accept the ethical level. From the time I was teaching in Islamia until I was appointed professor, I accept that, but it's only at ethical level. But he said, Al-Ghazali said, there's a difference between knowing what it means to be healthy and being actually healthy. There are two different things, Al-Ghazali said. Yeah, to know what health means is different from actually having health. So he said, I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied anymore to know what health is. I want to be healthy. So I think in the case of knowledge, that is also that. So in other, not like nowadays in our modern time, precisely because we don't experience it, we reject it. Yeah. So I think the important thing about learning Al-Ghazali today is to be open to all avenues of knowledge. Don't block. Yeah. Don't block those avenues to knowledge. All right. And try to test, to verify those claims. In other words, that is very important for appeal to Muslim. Verify claims. Whenever we hear any claims about knowledge, verify that claim, establish that claim. That is very important.
Another question from Muhammad Zaki. Ghazali and Juwaini produced systematic analysis of Maqasid theory. We can include it within the scope of epistemology of jurisprudence?
Well, certainly. I mean, it is part of corpus of jurisprudence. Yeah. In other words, at that time, the time of Al-Ghazali, I think the Maqasid al-Sharia was not discussed outside the discipline of usul fiqh. All right, it was within that. In other words, at that time it was different. Now we are trying to create a kind of different, maybe a new branch of knowledge, Maqasid studies. But Maqasid Maqasid al-Sharia was discussed, and certainly Al-Ghazali, I mean, was the pioneer, one of the pioneers in that. So it is within the corpus. Yeah? In the past, Maqasid Sharia was in the corpus of jurisprudence, but now I think it is only proper. In fact, after how many years, many centuries now, I think we are in a better position today to consider really to make sure that Maqasid studies will really become a well-ordered, systematic discipline outside the fold of fiqh, of jurisprudence.
Yeah, that is related to Professor Bargul's second question, that in Al-Ghazali, in his book Al-Mustashfa, tried to include logic and other tools in the core of Usul al-Fiqh. So epistemologically speaking, do you think this effort brings fruit, Usul al-Fiqh, later in its evolution?
Oh, you see, we have to understand the situation of logic. Logic is just a discipline to serve as an instrument. To serve an instrument. It is not really of the same epistemological status as, say, as natural science or as economics or as jurisprudence. It's not. It's just logic is a kind of neutral thing. In fact, that's what Al-Ghazali also mentioned in his book Munkith min ad-Dalal, so regarding the position of logic. All right. So that's why he said logic. There's nothing for us to accept logic from the philosopher, but we use for our own purpose. All right. The philosophers use logic for their own purposes. We apply for the mutakallimun. Let us use logic for our needs. So in a sense that every discipline is using logic for its own needs and purposes. So there is a kind also of universal logic now. Yeah, Mantiq has become a universal science that even not only Muslim, all kinds of people also use logic for their own purpose. Yeah. So okay. I don't think that would pose any problem. As far as epistemology.
The question from Nuruddin Akbar: how is the comparison between Al-Ghazali and the Ishiraki Shohrawardi tradition regarding supra-rational experience? Is it true, or that unlike Ghazali, the Ishiraki, even though they affirm supra-rational experience, affirm capability of reason to find the ultimate truth?
I do not see any essential difference between Al-Ghazali and Shohrawardi. That's the important all this for people to realize, for us to realize the important place occupied by Al-Ghazali in the history of Islamic thought. Without Al-Ghazali, there would have been no the Ishirakis. All right. In other words, if we look at the writings of Shohrawardi, they really build up on the contributions of Al-Ghazali, the new way, the new path that was opened up in epistemology, and of course in terms of spiritual. In a sense, we cannot say much in terms of the difference, because Al-Ghazali did not live at the same time as sorry. It's only logical to find people who came later will able to expand what I say. But it's not in terms of what the later thing. They did not really started these innovative ideas. All right, Al-Ghazali. And another thing, of course, the difference. Al-Ghazali is the ulama of the ummah. He speaks for mainstream Islam. This is very, very important. Al-Ghazali and Ihya Ulumuddin is the symbol. That is the symbol. Ulumuddin, in other words, all right, if you try to read between the lines, I said, and Al-Ghazali said, no, I mean, that belongs to the discussion of the Khawas with Khawas. Yeah, no, I'm not talking about the Khawas. You know, Al-Ghazali wanted to preserve that. Yeah. But the Ishirakis, for example, the Sorodi, you know very well what happened to Sorodi. You know, he was killed by none other than our ruler Saladin. You know, we know that. But in other words, the difference is not so much in terms of the idea itself, but to what extent the idea was discussed in detail. I think that's why I see in terms of the later day thinkers.
There's a question from Mr. Johnny. He comes from Soka Gakkai movement, which is a Buddhist peace movement in Japan, founded by Ikeda. And the question is, was Ghazali searching for certain knowledge and that he was searching for the eternal truth?
Yes, that's correct. He was searching for the truth. All right? He was searching for the truth, and he was searching for certitude. Now, Al-Ghazali was a mutakallim, a scholar of Kalam. All right? He was also, in other words, it's interesting that Al-Ghazali was telling his fellow mutakallimun, I stand that. Now, if you all feel happy with the methodology of Kalam, well and fine. But I'm not, he said. In other words, as far as he personally is concerned, he hasn't yet arrived at that certitude. So he was looking for that certitude. And he cannot obtain that certitude by just depending on rational thinking. That is his argument. His argument is, maybe if the others are happy with it, fine. He's not complaining, all right? He doesn't want to force them to follow him, but for him, he is still searching for certainty. And to him, that certainty is to be found in the meditation, in the path of meditation, the spiritual retreat, all right? Something like, a Buddha-like, a spiritual retreat. So, and he found it. He found it. He said, at last, I found it. I found certitude, all right? Now that I found it, he said, I can come back to teaching again. I come back to teaching, but I'm not the same as Ghazali, all right? When I was a professor at Nizamiya, I was a different Ghazali. Now I'm different Ghazali. I think, yes, yes, that's correct. He was in search of certitude and that truth, which resides in the heart. That truth resides in the heart.
I give you two more questions. There are many, and we don't have much time. One question is this: it is said that from Brother Asad from Sri Lanka that it is said that Al-Ghazali borrowed from other religions. So did he borrow the simile of the elephant from Buddhism?
Well, I do not know the details, but I mean, one thing that we don't deny is that wisdom of all sorts, of all kinds, from the pre-Islamic days, inherited by Islam when Islam expanded as a region, and certainly to Central Asia, to Iran, all right? So you won't be, you won't be surprised if some of these things entered from the previous religion. But of course, Islam, you have to remember this: Islam is the universal religion. It is the last religion. It's the last revealed truth. Islam contains all the truths in principle. Islam contains all the previous truths given to the earlier religion. Islam is the synthesis. Islam is the final synthesis of all the religion. And therefore, what is contained in the other, what is true as contained in religion, is acceptable to Islam. And many of these stories, tales, and so on have universal significance, or the Muslims give a broader interpretation of what. So you know very well, Central Asia is the land of the Buddhists before Islam. Spread, right? It is an accepted, in fact, even among the Sufis, that Sufism learned certain things from the Buddhist spirituality. And in the case of the philosophies, Buddhist atomism also influenced Islamic atomism. I accept that this is one area where Muslims today lack the knowledge. I mean, we know better what we learn from the Greeks, but we know little what we learn from our Buddhists, our Hindus. But the principles involved are the same. The issues involved are the same.
Okay. The last question I'm taking, there are several, and we will send those questions to you later. The last question is from Dr. Professor Muhammad Aslam Hanif. He says that the 2021 Economic Nobel Prize, or Nobel Prize for Economics, was awarded to 3 economists who did work on natural experiments or real world. Their work in general is in the area of methodology of economics and argues that natural experiments provide rich source of knowledge. In economics, social science, empiricism dominates. If we wanted to follow Al-Ghazali's views on epistemology, methodology, how would our young scholars publish in Scopus Index journals in economics as required by the university and the ranking game?
Well, I mean, in principle, I do not see any problem. I do not see any obstacle. I do not see any kind of depriving our young Muslim scholars today to make discoveries in epistemology, in whatever discipline, not only in economics, but in other social sciences and so on. Because to me, what is important here is the principle. The principles as believed by Al-Ghazali have covered ideas in principle could be applied. It is up to us in our time to go into the details, but I think as long as we know what is the broad area that is called epistemology, because we now call Islamic epistemology, but in reality, Islamic epistemology is universal epistemology. We only call it Islamic because we want to differentiate it with the Western one. But the area of thought called epistemology, discussed by the Muslim epistemology, covered. There is nothing left out in terms of the principles, but not the details, of course. The details, this is for subsequent generations, later generation to develop. But whatever we develop is not of the category of principle that somehow did not came to the notice of the Muslim thinkers. I think the Muslim thinkers within that universe called epistemology, in principle, is there. I think that my response, Prof. Aslam.
Okay. Finally, we have there are many other questions, so I will stop it here. I now call upon Professor Abdulaziz Bargut, the Dean of Istac IIUM, to give you the certificate of appreciation. Please, Professor Abdulaziz. You need to unmute yourself. Unmute.
Thank you, Prof. Osman, for the great lecture. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. We learned a lot of things from you, and the way how you integrated Al-Ghazali's thoughts, it's really great. And I hope our participants, scholars, researchers, postgraduate students can pick up certain issues and certain important points, I think, for the future research. May Allah bless you, Prof. Osman. Sister Haslina, can we show the certificate of our Prof? Just certificate of appreciation. It's virtual for now. Okay, maybe there is a technical.
Yeah.
I think that we are having a technical problem, so we shall proceed and we will give it to you in print.
After the dua,
yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we end here, no, it seems that she started screening, sharing the.
And also we shall have one group photo, inshallah, in the end.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Thank you.
All right. There's the certificate.
Thank you very much.
Later on, we will send it in one engraved good certificate, inshallah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
May Allah bless you. Go ahead.
Yeah, we are continuing. We are going to continue with this Istac World Professorial Lecture. I just want to make an announcement here. The next one will be by Professor Yasser Auda, a very well-known scholar in the area of Maqasid al-Sharia, and he's he's living in Canada, I believe now, and we will be announcing that lecture very soon. Next month, Professor Bergut will be passing on the information from us. So we end today's session with the recitation of dua by Assistant Professor Dr. Nick Muhammad Saiful Aziz bin Nick Abdullah. He is the Deputy Dean for Students Development and Community Engagement at Istac IIUM. Professor Nick, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan tayyiba wa 'amalan mutaqabbala. Oh Allah, we ask you for knowledge that is beneficial, good provisions and deeds that will be accepted. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Oh Allah, make useful for us what you taught us and teach us knowledge that will be useful to us. Increase us in knowledge, grant us understanding of deen. Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa min qalbin la yakhsha' wa min nafsin la tashba' wa min da'watin la yustajabu laha. Oh Allah, we are seeking refuge in you from knowledge that is not beneficial. We are seeking refuge from a heart that does not tremble, from a soul that is not satisfied, from a dua that is not answered. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabah. Allahumma ja'alna mimman yastami'una al-qawla yattabi'una ahsanah. Oh Allah, show us the truth as true and grant us to follow it. Show us falsehood as falsehood and grant us to the ability to avoid it. Oh Allah, make us among those who listen the saying and follow the best. Allahumma ij'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuma وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم أحسن عاقبتنا في الأمور كلها وأجرنا من خزي الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Jazakumullah khair. I once again thank Professor Osman Bakar and Professor Ahmad Faris for coming and spending his whole afternoon with us and listening to this lecture. So we come to an end of this webinar. Jazakumullah khair. Salam.